How did India go from being independent to being controlled by Britain? India was a very self-sustainable and stable country before the British takeover. The ruling dynasty was the Mughal dynasty, established in 1526. Most people of the subcontinent followed Hinduism and Buddhism. The Indian people became hesitant of foreign traders when the British East India Company set up trading posts at Bombay, Madras, and Calcutta. In 1707, the Mughal dynasty started to collapse. In 1707, the Mughal dynasty started to collapse. The small states that formed the Mughal dynasty started to break away from Mughal control, and an Indian military defeat at the Battle of Plassey left the British East India Company as the leading power in India. The land that the East India Company owned grew over time, and at one point included Bangladesh, most of southern India, and all the territories along the Ganges River in the north. The British East India Company used multiple different tactics to control their growing territories, including direct or indirect government control. Over time, British interest grew in India. To the British, India's potential as a new market and resource for raw materials made India the jewel in the crown. The British slowly took control of India through the East India Company and set up restrictions to destabilize India's economy, ensuring that British goods remained superior. Following the economic takeover, the British prioritized India as one of their most valuable territories. To better control the country, the British established train lines, telegraph lines, dams, and bridges. Communication and railroad networks in India grew to transport raw materials and goods to and from ports. Indian education rose to a European standard, enabling Indians to become scholars, lawyers, doctors, and more. The British introduced vaccines and improved health and science practices. The British grew cash crops such as cotton, jute, tea, indigo, and opium. Opium was shipped to China in exchange for tea, or sold to the British in Europe. Many Indian farmers, however, could not grow these crops to feed their families, resulting in mass famine. Considering all these positive aspects, there were great negatives as well. These negatives included famine. Families were forced to grow cash crops and sell them for the country. This left farmers with no food to eat. Britain also didn't allow anyone to have a voice in government. They controlled almost all of the political and economic power, and the Indian people were profoundly disrespected due to the increased presence of missionaries and the racist attitude. Many sepoys died after the capturing of Delhi, or the Sepoy Mutiny. The British had a mass army of sepoys, who were Indian soldiers. Great Britain took away a lot of India's money to pay for the wars against Great Britain. The East India Trading Company then purchased materials at a lower price and sold those goods at a very high price. This majorly impacted the economy. The Indians were only allowed to use goods from Britain and took Indian goods away from the people. The Indian cloth industry, clock-making industry, metal, and carpentry industries fell due to the goods being cheaper from Britain. Overall, Indians significantly resented the British due to their attempts at converting the Indian people to Christianity and the racism that was displayed towards them. Due to this, the nationalist feelings grew, and the Indians began to majorly resent the British. Then the Sepoy Mutiny happened. The Sepoy Mutiny started when the Enfield rifles used by the Sepoys were rumored to be greased with beef and pork fat, which was extremely offensive to the Sepoys because Hindus consider cows sacred and Muslims do not eat pork. Many of the soldiers refused to take the weapons, so a garrison commander threw most of them in jail. The remaining Sepoys marched to Delhi and, with the soldiers stationed in Delhi, took it over. Then the rebellion spread to northern and central India. As a result of the Sepoy Mutiny, the British took direct control of India. The part of India that was under direct control by the British from 1857 to 1947 was known as the Raj. After the Sepoy Mutiny ended, a man named Ram Moham Roy began a campaign to modernize India. He opposed child marriage, the rigid caste system, and other traditional ways of life in India. He is known as the father of modern India because he believed that change was necessary for India to become an independent country. Nationalist feelings in India began to arise because of the Indian people disliking the fact that they were made second-class citizens in their own country. It was extremely difficult for Indians to get decent jobs, and if they somehow did, they were paid substantially less than Europeans. In the 20th century, after World War II ended, activists such as Gandhi began calling for self-government. Other nationalist groups, such as the Indian National Congress, founded in 1885, and the Muslim League, founded in 1906, fought for more freedom and eventually desired independence. The Sepoys also rebelled because of the poor treatment and disrespect of their culture they received from the British. The British government divided the province into two, with the Hindu section and Muslim section. In addition, Britain was extremely weak after the war and was not able to effectively keep their hold on India. Britain essentially gave India their independence because they did not have the resources to continue their rule. In 1947, British Parliament passed the Indian Independence Act, which created two free countries, Pakistan and India.